Hello and welcome to today's video. The topic we're going to cover today is one that's been coming up recently in a lot of the studio classes that I've been teaching, and that's around the topic of compassionate awareness. So first of all, what do we mean by compassionate awareness? Both compassion and awareness are two concepts which are spoken about at quite length in some of the ancient yoga texts, and particularly the Yoga Sutras. In terms of compassion, compassion is a quality that we can cultivate within us, where we are able to recognize and feel perhaps what we might call the pain and suffering in other beings, and feel in some way moved to assist or help them. And it's also important to recognize that compassion is that same thing, but recognizing the pain and suffering within ourselves as well, which we'll come on to talk about in a moment. An awareness, which we don't have time to get into in huge amounts of detail in this particular video, is simply what is often referred to as the witness. It's that space within us that simply observes, that watches, that witnesses, but that is unaffected by the content of that which it observes. As I said, we can go into a huge amount of detail on that. I'm just covering both of those very quickly so that we can give context to today's topic. So the question then becomes, what is compassionate awareness as it relates to our practice on the mat? And one of the entry points for understanding this is to know that in a lot of classes today, in a lot of way that asana is taught, there is a mix-up perhaps that asana is exercise. Now, it's not to say that asana is not exercise, but people often come to an asana class looking to sweat, looking to increase their heart rate, looking to increase their breath rate perhaps, and to experience some form of intensity. And whilst in and of itself there's nothing wrong with that, what we have to recognize is how far that has potentially deviated from the classic teachings of yoga, which actually talk about the fact that when we practice asana, we want the breath to be steady and smooth. We want the body also to be in a state of steadiness, but also ease and comfort, and for the mind to be connected to that which we are doing. And what we can experience when we push the body too hard and we seek intensity is that we're going to lose one or two, if not all three, of those aspects or qualities that are described in the classic and ancient texts. So the idea of looking for our edge, finding our physical edge in terms of pushing ourselves into a posture beyond capacity, maybe experiencing pain, maybe experiencing shortness of breath, lies directly in contrast to the way in which we are advised to cultivate our practice. So this is where compassionate awareness comes in. Compassionate awareness is the ability to watch over ourselves as the witness during our practice, and to notice when mentally or physically we have a tendency to push ourselves too hard. When we arrive in a posture that clearly is not working for our breath, when we arrive in a posture that clearly is not sustainable because our body is shaking or we are experiencing intense pain in some form or another in different parts of our body. When we notice that, compassionate awareness is one, the ability to notice that that circumstance has arisen, and two, to be able to respond in a kind and calm and compassionate way in order to walk back that experience into a state that is more sustainable and a state that is more balanced. So if we are able to cultivate this ability to pay attention to the way that we move, including the transitions in between the postures, to the way that we stay in postures, and to the way that we maybe push ourselves into different asanas and postures, we can gradually begin to rectify where we push ourselves too hard. And as a result of this, what we do is we start to cultivate more of a sense of calmness and steadiness in the body. We maintain this long and subtle breath that is talked about in the Yoga Sutras. And almost most importantly of all, we maintain equanimity of mind as well. So compassionate awareness becomes something that's very, very important that we just have in our back pocket at all times in our practice. And it's the ability to respond rather than react. And it's also the ability to cloak that response in an envelope of compassion. the compassion in this context is that I don't need to harm or hurt myself in order to make progress. I don't always need to be seeking intensity or something that is fast paced in order to have something that I can say I have achieved or progressed on, for example. And then, of course, the other thing that we always talk about in these videos is how do we actually bring some of these practices or some of these philosophical contexts in our day-to-day lives. And of course, this is a much bigger topic, but the idea of compassionate awareness in our day-to-day lives is the ability to notice when we're having a particularly busy day, the ability to notice when perhaps we're rushing and that there is stress rising in our body, that our breath is becoming short, that we're noticing tension in this place or that. And to be able to actually step back for a moment, to slow down, to take a couple of longer breaths, to just observe what's going on within, and then just recollect our energies towards that state of balance or mental equanimity before we continue. If the compassion is missing, what happens is we continue to force ourselves to operate at that pace, to live at that pace. For example, we're rushing somewhere because we're late. And at some point we know that we are going to be late no matter how much we rush. So in that state, the compassionate awareness to realize that actually we can slow down and arrive late and calm, or we can continue to rush and press ourselves and arrive late and stressed with all of the physiologically negative impacts that that can have on our bodies and on our breath and on our mind. So when you next come to the mat, see if you can connect to that space within that allows you to observe the way in which you're practicing, the way in which you're moving, the way in which you're holding postures and moving into postures as well. And see if that compassionate awareness brings up the opportunity to adapt the way you're practicing, to adapt specific asanas so you can begin to cultivate more of that sense of stability and ease in breath, body, and mind. So please reflect on this. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And if you're enjoying this content, please do subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button below. And I'll see you again next time. Namaste.